1, 2, standing by.
Everybody, you're listening to and possibly watching the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Brian Pittard.
I'm Steve Morey.
And I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
And we are your hairy heavy homos that talk about comic books. So you don't have to be a hairy heavy homo to listen in, or if you're joining us through Facebook Live, possibly streaming in. And we have an episode. We're going to be talking about comic books. Don't worry about that. But there's a couple of other things going on in the world, and we decided to add to that motif for this particular episode. So very recently, the series of Doctor Who specials with the 14th Doctor. Apparently, we're supposed to call him the 14th and not the 10th or 10.5. Those recently hit, and we feel very justified in talking about that because it is actually based on a comic book, the first special, The Star Beast. So we'll be talking about that and some other stuff in relation to Doctor Who. And then if you're like any of us, a lot of the social media feeds since yesterday have been filled with Spotify and a little bit of the YouTube stats of what people listen to in 2023. And though we are all music fans of varying degrees, it's all part of our lives. So we're going to be talking about the music that we really dug in 2023. And then we'll get to a little bit of comic book talk. We each have a book that we want to discuss. So that's our show for tonight, and we hope you enjoy it. So we're very happy to have Brother Bryan with us again, and there's nothing more appropriate when he's on to talk Doctor Who. So
What do you mean?
So Bryan, if you would just lead us into this conversation, we greatly appreciate it.
Oh my goodness, I would be so happy to. So I, for people who don't listen or haven't listened, way back, whatever, I talked about Doctor Who a lot, and this is true on this podcast, other podcasts, you name it. I am a big fan. If you're watching, you see my little prop TARDIS, and I have a prop screwdriver, sonic screwdriver from, this is actually Matt Smith's screwdriver, I think. But I'm a Whovian. I have been since I was 5, 6. I think, I don't know, some age when I hid behind couches watching Doctor Who in America on the PBS network in my local community in South Florida. And my first doctor was Tom Baker. We got that all out of the way. Great. This 60th anniversary special #1 that just came out last Saturday, and we're recording this the week after, it's going out the week after. Like, this is huge because it is so many things all happening at once. It's the first time a doctor has regenerated. So again, we're not going to explain all of Doctor Who, but basically the actor can regenerate to a different person. It's how the show has continued for 60 years. So this is the first time that is actually like a main story beat, not like a little Easter egg, that a doctor has come back, basically. So now we had David Tennant in the 2010s, teens, as the 10th iteration of the Doctor. Now we have David Tennant again as the 14th Doctor. And yes, there were 3 in between that were all amazing, and it's unprecedented, right? So this is really huge. In addition, we have a new companion who's not a new companion. In fact, they were a companion with David Tennant back in 2008, 2012. I don't know. My timeline's all screwy and wibbly wobbly. So
I think
Steve, you got it.
2009, because it was maybe 2000. Maybe it was 2008 because 2005 Rose, 2006 Rose, 2007 was Martha, and then 2008 Donna. But she did make an appearance before that.
Oh, she did. Absolutely. So
Runaway Bride.
Runaway Bride. Absolutely. The first appearance of Catherine Tate, the amazing, amazing British comedian Catherine Tate. So we have a returning doctor. We have a returning companion. And under the hood, we have a returning head writer, Russell T Davies, who actually brought Doctor Who back in 2005 into the modern era after the show had gone dormant since the mid-90s with the Fox movie that was a brilliant, by the way, Doctor Who movie. I highly recommend this movie. If you can watch it, I'm sure it's out there on some source. I'll leave that as to the listener as an exercise to find that. But it is actually great. It features Paul McGann. It is set in America because it was Fox. And it's actually really great. And the Eighth Doctor is amazing. And I kind of hope we get more of him in various forms. So Russell Davies is back. And that's huge because that doesn't happen very often either. So all of this is kind of unprecedented. And it's for the 60th anniversary. And so we get not two, but three specials, 1 hour specials of Doctor Who, of this incarnation, over the next 3 weeks to celebrate the 60th anniversary. And that is awesome. So I think, so I don't know, Caleb, did you watch the Star Beast, the first of the specials?
I have not. I'm a bad nerd. I have literally seen exactly one episode of Doctor Who ever. And it was
God,
like the 1000th episode or something where there was like a war doctor and he was floating around Earth and all the rest of them showed up to like wreak havoc on a thing. I didn't know what was happening, but it was a cultural event, so I made sure I was part of it.
I mean,
amazing! Coming in on that one is pretty crazy and fantastic. You probably were like, "What the?"
You watched the 50th. You watched the 50th anniversary special, which is actually I think it's called the Day of the Doctor, the Time of the Doctor. I can never keep those two straight, but
yeah,
epic. And honestly, if you're gonna pick one, it's not the right one to start with.
No,
but it's still pretty damn good.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah,
you don't have to be a Whovian.
Although I will say I watched a little bit on and off of one of the spinoffs I forget the name of it. There was an episode that is probably the second most terrifying episode of television I have ever watched that involved the Weeping Angels. Like I said, it's the spinoff that like Deadwood, Wormwood, or something like that.
It was
Torchwood.
Torchwood. Yeah,
Class.
Torchwood.
It might have been Class that had the Weeping.
No, it was Torchwood.
No.
Yeah, it's one of them where like the Weeping Angels, they try to trick it and they try to put it like film it, and that just creates more Weeping Angels. Terrifying critters. Like behind Buffy's Hush episode, which is one of the most terrifying things I've ever seen in my life. That Weeping Angels episode will keep me up at night. So those are my two experiences with Doctor Who. I am not a Whovian whatsoever.
No, and that is totally fine because you're going to be the best person to react and question and find out. Like, this is good. You're the companion for those of us, the rest of us who are very much Whovians who are going to play the role of the Doctor tonight. I don't know. That sounds exciting.
Hey,
as soon as it came out of my mouth, I'm like, oh boy.
Oh no. Well, hey, real quick, while we have a couple people here who've just joined, we've got James Figueroa here. Hey, Brian's here. Good evening, you handsome gents. And we also have David Hazan. Damn, all four of you. Yes, that's right, all four of us. Hey, David.
Aww.
And we've also got John Runyon joining us. Comic Book Bears Assemble. Shout out to the Weeping Angels. They rock. Yes, they do. And isn't there a comic book connection with the Weeping Angels? Say maybe with a particular writer who maybe wrote an episode about the Weeping Angels?
Oh, Cornell?
Neil Gaiman.
Oh, wait, he wrote Weeping Angels? Did he?
I believe that was his episode.
No, he did
in Doctor Who.
He did the Cybermen one, and he did the one on the planet with the house and the spare parts, and yeah.
I thought do you mean the
But Paul Cornell has also written. Maybe it's possibly him that wrote one of the.
Cornell might have, but
yeah,
could. But for some reason I had in my head that that the Weeping Angels episode was that Blink was written by Neil Gaiman. But
Blink is a Moffat. Stephen Moffat is.
It was Stephen Moffat. You're right. Yeah. Okay.
And I know this, and I will say this very publicly. I am the biggest fan of Stephen Moffat's. Yes, I know there are detractors out there in the world, and I know you have valid points about his writing style, but I am not going to talk about that tonight. So, Steve, is a Whovian. Bill is a Whovian. The three of us have seen the special. Well, okay. We'll honorary Whovian.
I will say though that I don't identify as a Whovian, but I'm not a civilian. Let's put it that way.
You're like John Suntress in the X-Men. He's like, I know the X-Men. I like the X-Men. It's not my thing.
I know about Doctor Who more than I've seen it. You put like a Sylvester McCoy episode in front of me, I might not be interested. Provided an hour-and-a-half documentary about the lost episodes, I'm riveted. So it depends. It depends.
Yeah. I think what's so rich about
there's a lot of Who that I haven't seen, but it's in some ways it's like the ideal geek franchise, because if this era doesn't tickle your fancy, something else might. It really is amazing. You have so many different, because that's the thing with the Doctor, is the shows have radically different tones from you can't even say actor now, with oh God, I can't think. Why am I not thinking of her name?
Whittaker.
Whittaker. I couldn't think of her name. God,
Jodie Whittaker.
Back in St. Olaf here. But there's like radically different tones to the show. Even from the outset with the revival, there was, Christopher Eccleston was a very serious character, and then you compound that, following up with David Tennant, who is my second favorite Doctor.
Interesting. So who's your favorite then?
Shoals.
Pertwee's my favorite.
Shoals.
Wow.
Oh man, Caleb! Wow. That's a deep cut.
That's like turn this mic off.
You're done. You're burnt. All right. Yeah. So favorite Doctors. This is actually very useful. Caleb, we're gonna skip you obviously because you seem a little. Steve. Oh, there you go. They're perfect. Good. Actually, yeah. Good for you. Steve, who's your favorite Doctor? And you can pick two.
So the Doctor, because I started watching Doctor Who probably about the same time you did, and I was seeing the same kinds of episodes you did. So of course Tom Baker was my introduction. But man, I love the newer Doctors a lot more, but I think maybe because they had a lot more to play with. They weren't as stymied by, the limitations of the BBC and the backstage politics as much, I think.
And the episodes are longer.
The episodes are longer. I mean, if you go back to the old ones, it was all like those 5-part series.
Still, but it's still a half an hour show. It's very different compared to an hour show.
Yeah, they're so fast, and yet they're so awkward at times when you watch the old stuff, and you're like, it's only half an hour.
The cliffhangers are like,
yeah.
Did you have to cut it there? Like that doesn't make any sense. But
so you didn't pick though. You're
okay. So
hedging.
So I struggle with this because I love David Tennant. I do. I love him a lot. And also, couple of my favorite episodes were his episodes. But I do have to say Matt Smith. And, and I think I wouldn't have liked Matt Smith as much if it wasn't for Amy Pond, if it wasn't for Karen Gillan. And I think the pair of them together, plus Rory, of course, I think the pair of them together were just amazing TV. And I don't want to say anything bad about Clara. Gosh, I've forgotten the actress's name all of a sudden. Because she was there as well, towards the end of Matt Smith's run. But I think because of Amy and Karen Gillan and Matt Smith together.
Yeah.
I can't.
No.
I will say this about.
I do know this actress's name is Jenna Coleman.
Jenna Coleman, yes.
I do know that. I couldn't think of Jodie Whittaker, but I do know Jenna Coleman's name. But I think, Steve, you hit on something that's really interesting, because when the Doctor changes, it doesn't necessarily mean that the companions change.
Not
and
always.
Sometimes it turns out to be a better combination with somebody who was actually a companion with the predecessor.
Mm-hmm.
I think the best example of that is Jenna Coleman. I think she's a better companion to Peter Capaldi. Yeah. And the transition episode, the Christmas special, which is like the time of the Doctor, one of the days, the day of the Doctor, one of those two, transitioning into, and I just watched this the other day, Deep Breath. Not only is Deep Breath one of my favorite episodes, and it's a transition, like regeneration episode, the way they hand off from the Matt Smith into Capaldi, And the way they wrote it with this idea that people would not accept an older doctor after having multiple younger doctors, like it's just so nice and refreshing and interesting and different and consoling all at the same time. So yes, if I have to pick a favorite, and I hate doing this because they're all great, I do mean that. I think Capaldi is probably my favorite now, second only to Matt Smith. And that's just because those two
off from you guys.
Yeah. Well, and
I also have to say though, like if I had to say like who is the doctor, like you gentlemen, it's Tom Baker. You know, that's my entry point, and that's who I still kind of think of. That's my anchor, both past and forward. And yet he's not my favorite, but he is. You know, he's who I think of first when I think of the name Doctor Who, and I think that's just natural. Do. Yeah, you know,
the hat, the scarf, the the jelly babies. I mean, like basically, it's like that's what people, especially people who have never watched it, who are of a certain age, Caleb, I think, so maybe a little bit older than you, probably think of Tom Baker, just because that's what was all over PBS in the 80s.
Yeah.
You know, they just like, it's just okay. Doctor Who, it's that guy on PBS.
And also for Bryan and I, we were actually in the two markets that had that first had the Pertwee repeats. It was only the New York market and Orlando and Miami that had Pertwee until like the 90s.
Yeah.
But in the 80s, we had a run where the stations were actually showing them, and that's what that fascinated me, because first of all, you have Roger Delgado as the Master, who I just think was the best villain that's ever been in the series. And for comic book people, Doctor Who is the most comic booky rogues gallery that you will get outside of comics.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I do want to move us on to the new special, because I mean, we can talk too for and this is great. I could do it. Like literally at one point I was like, I should just do a Doctor Who podcast before this new thing happens. and it didn't happen. It's fine. So the new one is called Star Beast. It is based on a comic that we're going to talk about a little bit, a comic strip, I should say. And but it does have all these elements coming back into this refreshing sort of reunion type family adventure. And that is something to always keep in the back of your minds, is Doctor Who can get really intense, and it can be sci-fi, and it can be fantasy, it can be historical in some regards or whatever, but it is ultimately a family-ish adventure. It's always about the Doctor, his companions, sometimes their families, but it's a show that multiple generations now, I mean, like at least three generations technically, have like grown up and passed to their kids and to their kids now. So I mean, that is such a treasure, that is such an institution, and now not just in England but in the whole world. And really it was from the beginning, fairly early on. It was Australia, it was a lot of the colonies of the UK, but like everywhere now knows Doctor Who, and especially now that Disney Plus has been distributing this new stuff. And that's just gonna, in some ways it's given us some great new budget, and maybe we'll talk about that, but like it's just given us a better distribution plan for a lot of people. Now some countries, I think Australia was the one that kind of got the short end of the stick, because it used to be on their what is it, CBC? No, what's the Australian
ABC.
Right. And now because of the Disney Plus deal, you have to watch it on Disney Plus there, and that's pissed off a lot of Australians. So I'm sorry if that's the case. I don't know about New Zealand, but I definitely heard about that Australian thing, and that's unfortunate. But
maybe if David could chime in.
Yeah. And the chat, honestly, tell us your favorite Doctors too. I feel like this is not, we don't want to limit this, but so quick reactions. Steve, what do you think of Star Beast?
I really loved it. It's really funny because it had all the elements of like the perfect fan service episode. I mean, here you go. You've got David Tennant, which a lot of people, in the later generation of Doctor Who fans, that was their favorite Doctor, or like just a major Doctor. David Tennant's, running around being crazy. I don't see, whatever. Coming back, Donna Noble, of course, Catherine Tate, just hilarious, over the top, super lovable. Some of my favorite episodes especially the library. Oh my god, what was it? The silent was it the Library of Silence or
Silence in the Library?
Silence in the Library.
Whatever the second one is.
Yeah. Which introduced us to River Song and all that. Like, I mean, those episodes are so just they just fill me with joy. And so having these two back together in an episode is wonderful. But also there's so many, call outs to sort of the most recent era of Doctor Who. Just name drops and seeing Donna's husband, who we hadn't seen since that since like that little thing, talking about her father, who was who was essentially a companion and an extremely important character in a few episodes without Catherine Tate, and just
grandfather,
the grandfather, yeah, who
I love that character. Love that character.
Wilf was fun. But just just a lot of great little quips here and there. But I just love the fact that you have the actress, the trans actress specifically, and I'm going to that's very important for this episode. The trans actress Yasmin Finney from Heartstoppers, which I was just sort of like, oh my god, look at it. I recognize her. And getting to play a trans character. Miriam Margolyes, who everybody loves, everyone's favorite cantankerous woman, playing the voice of the Meep, and doing such a great job with the two different sides of that character. But on top of it, it's fun. It brings in Unit. We get lots of Unit references. We get in reference of I guess it's Nardole. I can't remember. I could never remember.
Wait, they made a Nardole reference?
Yes, Nardole's name is dropped. It's when the Doctor is in the cab with Donna's husband, and they're talking about, oh well, how do you know Donna? I'm friends with Nardole. What's Nardole?
Oh, no, Neris,
not Nardole, but Neris,
and not Nardole.
Wait a minute. I'm like, but it was the other end one. My brain's everywhere. But I just
blame your cold.
Great. We're throwing a whole bunch of like these just great little fun name drops and name things all over the place.
Can I go back to something real quick? Because this is you opened the door to something that I did want to make sure we talked about.
Oh, yeah.
Is Yasmin Finney's character, who is Rose in this show, Donna's daughter's trans daughter?
Of course,
is she trans or is she non-binary? Because that's actually a sticking point I have.
So she does, like, again, she is referred to as she. That is the pronoun that's used. So trans, non-binary, and trans, there is, she is on that spectrum. And I don't think it's 100% specific until the end, when, of course, it becomes a very important plot point.
So I don't want to spoil too much of the plot point, but I do want to at least bring this up because I have trans people in my life who have brought this to my attention. And so if I were to offer any counterpoint to our love fest that is going to be a love fest, I mean, I assume, Bill, you also enjoyed it. And I did too, by the way. This is that. There is confusion when you say trans and then you make like a non-binary sort of reference because they're not the same. There are people who are both or in that trans non-binary combined. And so they're a little bit more gender fluid, but trans individuals are typically not non-binary. And, so that is, if there's only one criticism of this episode, to me, that is just something that Russell Davies
I am on such a different wavelength from you on this, Bryan. I am on such a different wavelength for you. And again, it's a plot point, but when they say why the power gets released, and it's because of the gender identification, I found that so touching. I found that so incredibly touching. So I did not view it through that lens of confusion at all.
Okay, and then that's like fair. I mean, it's just again, this isn't my issue. This is a trans individual's issue. So I'm not trying to pick a
I guess I could understand that, but it also isn't. I don't think the actual momentum of the episode hinges on that.
Oh no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's again like take the lens of a cis man that we all are self-identifying cis men, and try to imagine a lens of a trans person, man or woman, and to them, when they hear that you're conflating non-binary with their experience, that is something that it doesn't ring true. And so what I'm saying in all this isn't meant to be like Russell Davies or Davis should be canceled. I'm not going down any of those things. That's not me, and that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is Russell Davies takes a lens as a writer, as a cis white man, and I'm sure workshop this. I have no doubt he sought out communities to listen and think about it, because he did that with the ableist stuff with Davros, which
if they were going, just look at the character, the actor who was hired, and I'm using actor, just as one. So I don't understand. I will never understand any kind of charge of insensitivity there.
No, and it's a sticking point, because again, it took somebody I know's took them out of the story when they realized what was kind of happening. So the word was jammy. I said this in a review somewhere. I said, this is jammy. Jammy means kind of like you're getting away with it, but it's a little bit of a mess. And so to me, Russell Davies, sometimes that's his writing style. He, like the ending of his episodes going way back, they work at an emotional beat, but they don't always entirely and Moffat too, by the way. It's not just Davis. But again, that's my only nit for this whole thing. I think the rest of it's fantastic. I think everything Steve said is absolutely spot on. The new TARDIS looks amazing.
Yeah.
My God. No, go ahead.
I have a question about that though. So, and this is coming from a place of just ignorance on my own part, right? But I've got non-binary people in my life, and I've got trans people in my life, and again, we all live in different parts of the world, even in the United States, right? Like what it means to be trans, and like the identities and stuff on the left coast and the right coast, and down here on the third coast. It's a lot of different things. But the people in my life that are non-binary, at least in the way that I've talked to them and understood it, is they tend to view themselves as being on the trans spectrum, but not trans, right? So, and again, this is coming from a place of ignorance. Is that and I haven't seen the episode, right? But is that not the case? Because you just said there was kind of a delineation between the trans community and non-binary folks. But I've always understood it to be like non-binary is on the trans spectrum, although they are not they are not trans, right?
Yeah.
So is that not and I want to make sure I'm doing using the right kind of ideas.
No, it's and I'm speaking as a cis male too. I'm not saying I have this my own experience, but I do have trans people in my life, just like you do.
Sure.
And the one person who brought this to my attention, the way he explained it is, when you're trans, that can include non-binary, but the opposite isn't necessarily the case.
Gotcha.
So if you're so that trans is sort of the umbrella term of just lots of things, but non-binary means you're literally not binary. You're not male or female. You identify somewhere in between or neither. And so when you say you're trans proper, I think sometimes that's just more definitively male or female, which Rose is presented as female. So that's it. And that's just, again, how they watched the episode, and they sort of had that reaction as a trans person. They were like, wait. So that, again, not the end of the world, but it's something I feel like it's not being captured as a nuance in the discussions about this episode. And it should, just because it's an interesting distinction that is like a learning experience. You know what I mean? Like, so.
I guess for me, it's you don't identify as the gender that you were assigned at birth. And so that like, I don't know. For non-binary, they also don't identify as the gender they were assigned at birth. Neither do trans people. And so I think that's where the again, I'm not equipped to have this conversation. I'm just like coming from a place.
Yeah, this is. I think this is above our pay grade.
I know.
But hey, really. I'm sorry if I was making faces, but there's so much. There's so many.
You were
other
doing
elements
that thing.
To the show that that I just really think, because of the limited time we have, that we should address.
All right. Well, moving on, Bill. What?
We haven't even given the basic plot, which you can say in like 4 sentences.
Go for it. Well, what was the plot?
Okay, so the basic plot: Doctor's regenerated. He doesn't know why, and this carries from 2 years ago. It doesn't know why this is a familiar face. He doesn't know why he's back as that version of the Doctor. There's a situation with Donna because she took Time Lord energy, that if she finds out that if she remembers the Doctor at this point, he manipulated things so that she forgets, she will die. He's on Earth. A spaceship crashes, and there are people pursuing, or obviously soldiers pursuing, this apparently cute and cuddly creature known as the Meep. And that's it. And then we go from there. Just figure we should get at least get some little hole in there, of that plot.
So
the villain, yeah.
What do you think of it though? Did you enjoy it?
Oh yeah, very much so. Very much so. I mean, I think one of the things I enjoyed the most about it was as much a Donald Noble episode as it was a Doctor episode. And because it was, one of the more interesting companions, because when she became one, her life was kind of a mess. I mean, she was a temp worker. There wasn't really much sense of someone who was intrepid or had purpose. And as we went through the series, we saw that. So that it was a Donna episode as much as a Doctor episode, I really liked. And I also really liked that it wasn't just a nostalgia fest, because there was elements of looking forward. I really hope we see that unit operative with the wheelchair again, because I was fascinated by her. I thought that was a great
she has
character.
Missiles.
Yes.
She has missiles. We all do.
I thought that was a fantastic character. So as many things that harken back to previous, there was this, and even the character of Rose. I mean, there's no reason that character can't factor in later on, especially with what the knowledge that she's obtained at this point.
I really hope she comes back, because I love Donna. I love the fact that the whole family was there. I wish Rose had gone with them and had this, adventure together. But I get the scope. I get it's like you're bringing the band, putting the band back together. We don't need other side stuff more than just as the, and maybe she comes back in the last episode. I mean, of the three. I mean, it sounds like, just as a spoiler, the second episode's very much the two of them focused in a certain situation. And the third one, it's back to crazy balls to the wall Earth based shenanigans. Very excitingly, which again, if you've seen any of the previews, it's coming. Neil Patrick Harris, who is fantastic in so many things, and is now going to be part of the Doctor Who canon as the revival. Caleb, you'll appreciate this, of a character from the very first Doctor back in the 60s, known as the Toy Maker, Celestial Toy Maker. And they have done such a fantastic, weird, it's an evolution of the character out of certain bad tropes that the original character was basically dressed as this Asian stereotype, whatever. So they've kind of fixed that now, thankfully, as they need to. And so we have this queer legend playing this mischievous trickster type character coming back to haunt the Doctor. So I'm very excited about that. So the specials were great. I know we want to move on, but if you're not a Doctor Who fan, is this the best place to jump in? Maybe not. Give it a shot, see what you think from just a tonal perspective. But you know what, there's continuity. You may have to go read the editor's notes, right? But know that by Christmas you're getting a brand new Doctor, a brand new companion, and in a brand new era of Doctor Who. And that, above all else, is a perfect jumping on point. So at the minimum, if that's interesting to you, and Caleb, you as well, if the Doctor Who stuff has ever been kind of mildly on your radar, Christmas Day, or after, get on Disney Plus or get on wherever you watch it, elsewhere, and just check it out, because it's such a great new era. Ncuti Gatwa is going to be such an amazing Doctor. And then I forgot her name. What's the not Rose? I always want to say Rose. Ruby Sunday, Ruby Slippers. What is it?
Ruby something, yes.
So I have a question though. You're talking about all the queer connections to this though. What about John Barrowman? Any talk about looping John Barrowman back into any of the mix? I mean, like I said, I don't have my ear to the ground on this. So
I will tell you only that he really wants to.
Okay.
And I know there have been issues in the past with whatever validity of his behavior on set that have probably not helped his cause. However, if anyone as a showrunner was to bring him back, Davis is the guy. Davis.
I do have a question about the new Doctor and something I observed. And Bryan, since you're probably of all of us the one most well-versed in Who, they specifically refer to that actor as the first openly queer actor to play the Doctor. And not the first queer actor to play the Doctor. And I was wondering if any of the previous Doctors that was either rumored about, or I was struck because there were two different press releases that said openly queer.
I have a theory on this, but I don't know why.
Yeah,
they're hedging their bets, maybe, but Ncuti was not open about being queer until relatively recently.
Okay.
So maybe that's something related to that, but he is the first openly. And I think in historical terms, more people use that, because if there's any chance, they don't want to like diminish people who may have been closeted or just not. Yeah. So that's my guess. I don't know.
And just going with things that you talked to Caleb about, it's the 60th anniversary of the show, and it's a very good time because there's a lot of access to stuff. Look at Tubi. The BBC has supplied the first 7 Doctor episodes, all of them. You're talking a canon from 1963 to 1989 are up there for free. They have the animated reenactments for the missing episodes where only the audio survived. It's an incredible wealth of episodes that's up there for free. It's amazing.
Yeah, Tubi, every time I'm like sitting there and my brain's like, I don't want to deal with finding something. Like if I go to Tubi, I go to the Doctor Who channel and there's always something. I'm like, yes, oh my God, that ridiculous episode. There's also on YouTube, and I know you were going to talk a little bit about the documentaries you've been finding, but on YouTube, there's not only these great documentary, like little segments that are coming out, but there's also like the Tales from the TARDIS, which is basically like sort of a story in like actual continuity-ish like recap episode where they'll like sit down. The actors are like the current they're this is recent, they're filmed like 6th Doctor with one of their companions, and then they'll rewatch rather an old Doctor Who and kind of talk about it as the characters, not as the actors. So it's an interesting kind of neat like reflection on the classic Doctor Who stuff from the living actors that played the Doctors and the companions. And I don't know if they're going to ever put that on Disney Plus. I would like for them to, but you can find those on the interwebs. I think they were on YouTube at one point.
And one of the other documentaries on Tubi that I watched last night is called Doctor Who Am I? And Bryan, you just mentioned how much you enjoy the Fox TV movie that happened in, I guess, 96. And it's the story of the guy who wrote that and his detachment and then subsequent reattachment to the world of Doctor Who, and also a commentary on fans, specifically American fans, who appear, at least from the documentary, to be far more rabid generally than the British fans. There are people saying like, the level of cosplay in America is like 90% to 10%. In the UK, it was really interesting about the differences, and it was a really well done documentary. And again, that's one of the other pieces that's up there for free on Tubi. I also went down a YouTube rabbit hole. If you watch any documentaries by someone named Josh Snares, he puts together these really excellent, just compendiums about the lost episodes and back behind the scenes stuff. And he really knows his stuff, and almost plays like the missing episodes as murder mysteries almost, of the clues and where things may be still, and these like it's like, oh, why did they do this, because there were episodes in Nigeria as recently as the early 90s. And just when we're talking about lost episodes, it was commonplace in England to wipe videotape because it was effectively a precious commodity, and a lot of these episodes only survived because there were export copies that went out to other countries, because the BBC was terrible at archiving their own stuff. So if I'm talking about lost episodes, that's where that's coming from. But just other these mini documentaries, I had never heard about this. There was at one point Disney were involved with Doctor Who before, and they wanted Steven Spielberg to help with the put together like the show Bible, and it actually got to the point. It actually got as far where they did have like a visual Bible, and the doctor that was engaged would have been wonderful, Eric Idle. I mean, he would have been, and this would have been early '90s, so he just would have been the perfect age for that. And just, oh damn, that didn't happen.
What a shame! What a missed opportunity. But
and I never
heard
of that before. I never heard that before. But then
neither.
They're showing these examples of effectively like the visual Bible that they had, and like really like very '90s looking Daleks and stuff, and it was really cool.
It's like that lost Superman stuff with Nick Cage, where you're like, oh my God, that is a thing that could have been, and then in some weird way actually became true later. Anyway, so I really need to catch up because there's so much great Doctor Who stuff now. We are in a moment of inflection of all of this great stuff. But again, I think these specials are really great, and it's an amazing moment to reflect on the history of Doctor Who, but also look forward to the progression of Doctor Who. And the only thing I'll also just throw in there is, if you want to piss off certain communities and the currently fractured social political mess, like start talking about this latest episode with the Doctor Who fans who are a little more on the conservative side, and just watch their heads. Not all of them, of course, but certain ones. They
got nothing. They got nothing now.
No.
What are you doing?
It's crazy. It's crazy to me, though. It's like Doctor Who has always been so progressive, like so far back, and not just to 2005, but especially since 2005, that it's like, what? Huh? Really? Did you?
But, even in the 60s, in some of it, like you said, like the Toy Maker will make you cringe when you see that in that original thing. But it was one of the few BBC shows where there was multiculturalism, and on a regular basis. So I don't know what goes on with people, but just wanted to tie this up, going back to comics. This story, The Star Beast, was actually based on a 1980s Doctor Who comic book. Was reprinted in the States as Doctor Who #1 from Marvel. Something I thought was very interesting. I wonder what the backstory is. The original story was credited to Pat Mills and John Wagner as writers, with Dave Gibbons of Watchmen fame as the artist. If you looked at the credits for the episode, it's only Pat Mills and not John Wagner that's credited. I really wonder what the story is behind that.
I know why.
You know
I know why.
Oh, tell me, please.
They mentioned this in one of the little YouTube bits. It's what was the second? Wagner is the other guy,
John
right?
Wagner, yeah.
He was a writing partner of Pat Mills, and so they did a lot of things together. And they may have actually collaborated on the Star Beast as a separate non-Doctor Who story pitch. But by the time they actually were writing the episode as Doctor Who, it was Pat Mills. But I think because at the time they just both had their like a co-writing credit.
Okay.
That's why.
So
right.
Okay.
Why John Lennon is credited on Yesterday. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Then that makes sense. I just thought that was really interesting there.
Yeah. So just to kind of put how this was originally published, Doctor Who magazine, which was published by Marvel Comics.
Doctor Who
well,
Weekly.
It was Doctor Who Weekly, but it was Doctor Who Weekly magazine. Was
Doctor
published by
I have issues.
Marvel in the UK, starting, I believe, in 1979. And this was it started in issue number 19. And what they would do is they would have several articles, they would have several specials, and then you would have multiple comics, in various parts, very similar to what you would see on TV, where you'd have, like every week you would have part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4 of whatever the story would be. In this one, part 1 was in issue number 19. I think it was 7 parts altogether. I have all of them. And they're really, like, it is really interesting how they cut it up. Compared to this, so if you read the comic and then compared it to the episode, they did kind of heave-ho quite a bit. and also changed it around because there was no Donna Noble, back in 1980.
Oh, it's a different Doctor too.
Yeah, very different. It's Tom Baker is the
Tom
Doctor. And he is without companions except for one, and that is our favorite little K9. So K9.
No. There is a companion, is what I read, and maybe I misunderstood this, but the companion that he had is the first black companion of continuity.
So yes and no. So basically, in this episode, his companion is K9.
Okay.
But Sharon is one of the two, and I actually have visuals. So here's actually what Bill is talking about. When it was republished in the U.S., it was published all together, it was collected as Doctor Who #1. And you see here on the cover, here's Tom Baker. Here's the little.
That's a Walt Simonson cover.
Oh yeah, which is pretty cool. And then of course the Warth or Wrath Warriors, and in the background you could kind of make out Sharon, and then her friend, I can't remember, Nigel or something like that, who's kind of a douche, and who disappears after I think part 2. And this was when it was originally published. This was the first part, was in issue number 19 of Doctor Who Weekly, the magazine published by Marvel Comics. And it's really fun. Dave Gibbons, I think at this point, how long had he been? Because he'd been contributing to 2000 AD and a bunch of other books.
Yeah, probably like 3 or 4 years at that point.
Yeah, so this is his. Yeah, this is kind of like early-ish.
He was one of the first wave of the 2000 AD guys. So probably like 3 or 4 years.
And he does some very interesting things with, I think, the characters here. So this is the version of the Meep that shows up in the book, and this is the version of the Meep that they created for the show. Very close, interestingly. So they get the large eyes, the big ears, just I'm so cute. Oh my goodness. And then of course we have evil Meep. Suddenly the Meep pulls a gun from a hidden pouch. Meep. And we do have sort of like, it's crazy. And of course, again, it was originally published in black and white, and I know they colorized it for the comics in the US, but it's really interesting that the Meep, the shading and everything when the Meep is revealed is kind of bluish, which is how they put him in the US comics. He was shaded blue. But yeah, did a really cool job here.
Is that what happens to a Furby when you get it wet?
Yeah, pretty much. It's like, super gremlin.
That is terrifying.
Oh yeah. Look, I loved the design. I thought it was great. And seeing the original design from Star Beast, it's not that far off. It really isn't. But it's a really interesting story. So in this particular story, the Doctor shows up. He was trying to go to like Tenerife or something for vacation. The Doctor was always going, like, kind of like Bugs Bunny, was trying to get to somewhere tropical and always ended up in the middle of like a disaster, some kind of cosmic situation. And basically, the same thing that happened in the show happens here in the comic. A spaceship crash lands, and people are kind of trying to figure out what happened here. But you have the character of the Meep itself appears very cute, appears to a couple kids, Sharon being one of them, and I'm trying to find a good picture of Sharon and Fudge. That's
who made the cut to the special.
Yes.
Which I thought was amazing and weird at the same time.
And I think it's really interesting that the Fudge in the comic is just a complete and utter douchebag. He's terrible. He wants to sell the Meep. He's just horrible. He's a terrible, terrible character. The Fudge in the special seems, kind of like a neat kid, although he spends quite a bit of time just looking out of his window. That's kind of what he does. But the way that Dave Gibbons shows, portrays Sharon and draws Sharon is very interesting. She has an extremely high forehead that starts back here. And I'm not sure what reference he was using for that, but it's very interesting that she has a very interesting look. She looks like a much older woman, but in this is still a teenager. But the basic plot points are there, and it's really neat. I mean, there's this whole thing where the Wrath Warriors think the Doctor is working with the Meep, and so implant him with a nuclear device that will explode once it comes close to the Meep. So he's basically being used as a Trojan horse. But eventually, the Earth Warriors sit him down. The Doctor's like, okay, we're gonna talk this out, and realize that this is the Doctor himself who saved the galaxy from the Cybermen. This is a Doctor who's very important. This person is very important to the Earth Warriors' history. And so realizes, oh, he's not working with the Meep. He's actually a good guy. Let's work with him and figure out, how we could kind of trap the Meep. Because at this point, the Meep has started taking over the minds of various workers, Sharon herself, to kind of rebuild the spaceship. And very similar to the show, if the spaceship takes off, London's destroyed, the Earth will actually be plunged into a black hole, all sorts of like crazy shenanigans.
Wow.
But he does, save the day in the end. And Sharon, of course, comes out of her trance and helps the Doctor in saving not just that part of the city, but also the Earth as a whole from the evil Meep. But yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting story. And if I were a kid reading this in the early 80s, I'd be kind of really frustrated about having to wait, 6 weeks, 7 weeks to get the whole story, because there's a lot that happens. But it was a really interesting way to put this out. And the fact that it was a weekly magazine, it coincided I think it came, it was on Thursdays and Doctor Who was on Saturdays or something. It was perfect. So you could get some Doctor Who during the week and several stories, several prose stories, several different parts of different comics, and that would tide you over for the weekend when you can actually see the new episode of Doctor Who. So I thought this was really cool. I think it stopped being weekly and just became the monthly magazine sometime in the mid 80s towards the end. Yeah. But yeah, it's just
that's when it got the magazine title.
Yeah. But it's just really cool if you can find them. I know a lot of times they're kind of cheap. I was able to find some in an online archive that had all of the the oldest issues. But it's really fantastic.
Yeah, there is an issue of Doctor Who Classics on Titan that does have this story. Yep. I think it's number 3.
Yeah. That is one of the harder things.
In color, though. I think there is something to be said about seeing it in the original black and white, though, too.
Yeah.
It's just a difference important than the inking. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, anytime you get to see Gibbons stuff in black and white, it's worth looking at. I mean, color, like I love color. No offense to colorists at all. Dave Gibbons is one of those illustrators that, like, color does him no favors. Even Watchmen. Show me those Watchmen panels in black and white. It is phenomenal.
Yeah, I think that my impression of this was the original comics were great, and the collected Marvel comics with the colorization almost made it look like Marvel Star Wars from the 70s, where it's just sort of like interesting color choices that you may not make today. But I think it's very.
And also, sometimes they didn't have didn't have the reference material.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but
so
yeah,
Steve, I really want you to rest your voice for a little while. You're scaring me here.
Oh man.
So we've had poor Caleb way in the back seat for most of the episode. So Caleb, I'm going to hand it over to you to lead the music discussion and put you in the front seat while Mr. Maury there can get some tea or something cold him down his throat, because I'm worried he's not going to be able to talk for the rest of the episode if he keeps yapping.
I am honored, and I will take the baton and I will lead it from here as far as the music goes. So, look, whether we're doing our whoops of the week or we're just talking in general, music is a big part of our lives. Like, as you can see from the room I'm in, comics, major thing. Like, I love comics. It is probably my favorite fandom. Music to me is probably number 2 in the amount of things I love. Obviously, from Bill's backdrop, if those of you who are watching this, he has an entire backdrop of just albums. It's fantastic, and it's a treasure trove. It is getting towards the end of the year, and as the end of the year goes, we're going to start seeing best of lists. And it doesn't really matter what kind of fandom you're in, right? You're going to see best of comics lists, best of graphic novels, best TV shows. Everything gets a list these days. And towards the end of the year, as Bill said at the beginning of the show, a lot of the streaming services and music things are also going to come out with the best albums of the year, or what have you listened to the most this year. And Spotify kind of led the charge on this, and they dropped their quote unquote wraps the other day, like at the end of November, which I thought was interesting. I'm not sure why. So the end of November came and it said, hey, here's the stuff that you've listened to the most this year. Here's your new albums. Here's your, the albums that you've just listened to in general. And so I reached out to us in our little super secret, totally locked down group chat that we have and said, hey, we all talk about music. A lot of times it's our geek gets. We all love vinyl. So we should say, hey, here's some of the stuff that we've been listening to this year. We don't have to go overboard or anything, but I found that what I'd listened to the most was very interesting. It's not what I expected. And so Bill's like, yeah, let's throw some of this on there and talk a little bit about music. So I really appreciated this. So do we want to go just like what we actually listened to the most this year? Do we want to talk about just albums that we enjoyed, new albums from 2023? Bill, how do you feel?
If anybody's able to talk about what they listen to the most, because I don't have a tracker for that.
Okay.
I'm only prepared to talk about what my favorites were. So if anybody else has, something where they can throw out, I can tell from me, sometimes what I listen to is predicated on the concerts I'm going to.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of listening to Garbage. There was a lot of listening to Depeche Mode. There was a lot of listening to the Monkees when I saw Mickey Dolenz show. So, leading up to Springsteen, there was a lot of listening to Springsteen. So sometimes my habits hit towards, what I'm preparing for the show, but also at the same time, it's, especially in this day and age, I mean, the music cues can come from anywhere.
Yeah.
Case in point, Steve and I, we were looking at a particular Thirst Trap video, and the music that was playing in the back was this Australian neo soul group, Ocean Alley, song I had never heard of. That's 7 years old. Speed it up, and it's been 2 days of singing that song nonstop. So you never know where the stuff is gonna come from. But unfortunately, I don't necessarily have like a decent tracker like a Spotify or a YouTube Music to say what I listen to the most, because I really don't use those services.
Yeah. So
I get into the arguments about whether artists get paid. Blah 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 blah. It's all been said. But I just don't. So if somebody does have something like that, I'd be interested to hear.
I do. So I actually do use, I switched over from Pandora to Spotify a few years ago. Again, all the arguments for it, I get it. I go to a lot of concerts. I give these people a lot of money. Like I do my part, right? I listen to music all day, every day. I can't be in a silent room. I love music. So just spare me the, oh, you use Spotify, you're a terrible person. Whatever. So, but Spotify does in the wrap, it does something really cool, and it lets you know what songs you listen to the most this year, and it lets you know what albums you listen to the most this year. I fancy myself if I had to say what's the one genre of music that I listen to the most, I would probably say rock and metal, right? Like that is tend to be where I live. Apparently this year, like if you know me in some personal life, I went through some stuff this year, right? Like lost some friends, dealt with some family stuff. It was a lot of stuff. I chose to listen to a lot of alt country this year, and I did not realize the extent that I listened to. The number one song I listened to this year was Hope the High Road by Jason Isbell and the 400 Unit. Number 2 was Let It Go by Sturgill Simpson. Number 3 was Outfit by the Drive-By Truckers, which is sung by Jason Isbell. Number 4 was Tupelo, Jason Isbell and the 400 Unit. And number 5 was Hurricanes and Hand Grenades by Jason Isbell. Apparently, I just was on a kick this year. I mean, I'm a huge Jason Isbell fan. That's no secret. Like, I've got all his albums. I love him. Did not realize the extent to which I had listened to him a lot. And he is, of course, the top artist that I listen to. Number 1 and 2 is Jason Isbell and Jason Isbell and the 400 Unit. I listen to a lot of just an instrumental kind of, I don't know what you call him, a swamp witch guitarist named Justin Johnson, who's all just instrumental dobro, slide guitar. It's insane, weird, witchy country swamp music. Sturgill Simpson was number 4. And for some reason, and I do not know why, Rob Zombie was number 5. I guess it's because some of the different mixes I listen to on Spotify plays a lot of Rob Zombie, and I just don't turn it because I enjoy Rob Zombie. I enjoy White Zombie more. I'm a big fan of Sean. I forget her last name. I think she's a great bassist. But so that's what I listen to the most on Spotify this year. A shit ton of alt country.
I gotta check this out now. I don't know Jason Isbell. I feel like you've been holding out on me.
Oh, I will send you. I will drop stuff on you.
Yeah, send me your favorite track because I alt country is just not on my music radar. But I also had a sort of surprising 5th. You know how that 5th place on the Spotify list. I was like, wait, what? So I'm kind of curious to how many of us had that experience. But I gotta hear some of this Jason stuff. It sounds great.
I will. Yeah, I think you'll. Like I said, it's different. It's alt country, but it's not radio country, right? He's an amazing singer songwriter. So I will send you some of his stuff. Who's next? Somebody else.
Bryan, it sounded like you had a tracker, so why don't you?
Yeah. I think, Steve, did you grab a graphic for this? I don't remember if I think I sent maybe this. So the first one was very surprising, and I know why, but it's not surprising, but it was like that. It doesn't jive with my normal listening habits. My number 1 listened to artist was Olivia Newton-John. And here's why. I did a charity curling tournament this year themed around Xanadu. So already I had been listening to a lot of Xanadu to prepare for the thing, and then as a playlist during the event. But on top of that, I decided to do a drag number to Olivia Newton-John's lesser known hit. I don't even know if it was a hit. Honestly, it probably wasn't. Called the Dolphin Song. And the Dolphin Song was, Bill, are you familiar? Because I feel like
it's on Physical. It's on Physical. Yeah.
Perfect. There we go.
Yeah.
So that was my drag number. There is video of this somewhere. I don't want it to be out in the world, but I will share it with you all if I have not already. But yeah, that was my top song because I listened to it to prepare quite a lot. But the artists that I want to talk about, the ones that I really listened to a lot, there's actually 3 of them. And they were like the top 2 artists, and then it was like 1 song from a different one. So Tuvalu, or if you're just typing it in at home, Tove Lo, is a Swedish songwriter, pop star that I saw last year in concert. So her album is from last year, Dirty Femme. But I listened to Pineapple and To Die For You and all of the top tracks from that album on heavy rotation in 2023, and that was mostly what I had in my top list. But then also Foxes, I think is the band, and Sister Ray is an amazing banger pop hit from her most recent album. Highly recommend if you just need a pure endorphin, positive dance ready injection, which I use if I need a little mood tweak. Mm-hmm. But the 5th one, sorry, and one more, Sex Brews. Have you heard of Sex Brews? ? And I don't mean it as a question, but I do. But the band is also Sex Brews with a question mark. They're a band out of Charleston, and I saw them this past year in Charlotte with my friends when I was down there. Actually, I think the day before I had brunch with Steve. So that group, Sex Brews, amazing. They're so funny and weird and such great performers. They have a song called Ford Taurus, and it is all about, it's a love letter to a Ford Taurus. I am not making this nonsense up. It is hilarious and absolutely top single, I guess, of my year. And when you go check Ford Taurus out, or you check Sex Brews out, you're just going to be like, oh my God, this is such great funk, such great fun. It kind of falls in the sort of funk category, I think, mostly, but it's just, they're great group out of Charleston. So highly recommend checking them out if you see them in concert. So that was my wrap, so to speak. But I will say I did one other choice, and I know we're going to talk about this with Bill too. Top album of the year. If I had to pick one that actually came out in 2023 that I spent a lot of time in, it is BT's The Secret Life of Trees. I'm sorry, Secret Language of Trees. BT is one of my favorite electronic musicians from years ago. I think with this binary universe, but I think even before that, as more of an electronic, like EDM kind of performer, DJ, but not a DJ. He's like a composer and all that. He's amazing. This album is very meditative. It has some sort of more upbeat tracks in it as well, but Ember is my favorite track off this, and it is just such a great meditation, like ambient sort of. Yeah, highly recommend if you like ambient electronic with a little bit of beat. BT's stuff is great, and this album is pretty epic. So that's my pick for this year.
That's very cool. Bryan, I have to say with BT, I'm mostly familiar with the remix work and not work under his own name. So that is something I'm going to explore because I know he's been active, but it's mainly been the remixing that I've been familiar with his work. I'm also very glad to hear that Fox that she's still active. I mean, I think people may most be familiar with her as the vocalist for Zed's Clarity. She put her follow-up to that was this fantastic single that did nothing called Body Talk, and she was somebody who dropped off for a while, and then I'm glad she's reappeared because it was like almost like a Duffy type of situation that they just got so depressed from the industry that they tanked out. So that's really good to hear. I was just reading a little bit about that. Steve, how about you? What have you been listening to this year?
So I use YouTube Music for everything, and they just published my year-long playlist where they took your top 100 and just here you go. This is what you're all listening to, and I should say I'm surprised, but I'm also not surprised. Every morning I wake up to mellow indie, so I was not surprised to see a lot of mellow indie kind of tracks show up on this, just because that's my daily alarm 5 days a week, 250 some days a year. But there are some good selections that popped up in there that are things that I listen to when I'm not trying to wake up and go get a shower to go to work. Nico Case is right in my top 5, especially the song. And this is an older song. This is from Helen, her, oh gosh, I think it was maybe 6 years ago, album, Last Line of Albion, which is just such a moving, really powerful song. Just like every time I listen to it, I have to wail along in my horrible off-key voice because it's so good, and get the little tear and everything. It's the same feeling I had for years ago with Tiger on a Chain, from her 2011 album, way back. But I've also got Silver Lining by Mount Joy, Riley Walker's The Roundabout. So again, we're kind of like going with some indie kind of stuff here. But one of the things that pops up quite a bit is music by here it is, Little Big, which I don't know why, but I guess probably because I play random Little Big all the time in some of the mixes I have. Who is it's a Russian, I don't know how to describe it. It's just sort of like dancey, poppy, but also kind of jokey kind of music. It's very odd stuff. But he's been around for a while.
That's the most Steve thing that could have been.
It is. I mean, he's done some collaborations with random people. Oliver Tree, I think he does a lot of stuff with them too. But it's just just very odd that it pops up so much in all my playlists. But also Carolyn Polacek does pop up quite a little bit.
She's great. She's like the Imogen Heap evolution into this thing. And have you gone back and listened to her older stuff? Like, she's been doing this kind of crazy, weird, witchy electronic stuff for so long in different brands. Just finally emerges just her. Obviously, a culmination, but like, it's great stuff, and it's pop accessible. It's not all weird. And it used to be some weird meditative ambient and then really experimental nonsense, but she's synthesized it into something really cool now.
Yeah, and it's just it's really interesting. Like I think I first heard her with was it Welcome to My Island? It just like the interesting way that she kind of like, you know, evolves the song, the track itself just kind of goes like it's very stilted, and then just like, I don't know, it's just the expansiveness
Good
of that.
stuff.
Yeah, oh yeah. But then also, you know, randomly I've got Manor Astroman is back. Daddy Frere is back. I've got We Are Scientists popping up quite a bit on my list. Florence and the Machine, Dance Fever did come out earlier this year. And that was, you know, that was something that I listened to quite a bit in the first half of the year. But yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of wacky randomness. But what I do see a lot of is stuff that I've been listening to, you know, off and on for like maybe the past 20 years is coming back in my playlist. Stuff I haven't listened to for years, like Guster. I haven't listened to it in like 10 years. I haven't listened to Guster. Tons of Guster showed up. I don't know how. It just happens. But yeah, just a weird mix of things. And of course, you know, the TikTok / Instagram artists like Carter Vale shows up on mine a lot. Chapel Rowan is showing up a lot in my list. So, you know, more recent musicians that you can see in sort of like interesting places, not usually the traditional, like I bought an album, you know, kind of thing. So yeah, that's my stuff. It's odd.
Okay. Well, let me lead with what I felt were the best albums, and y'all can chime in afterwards if there's anything that you didn't cover with what you as your most listened to, which you would rank among the best. And keep in mind, I am a 56-year-old man and don't necessarily have my finger on the pulse beat for me to say that. Like I said, I'm no civilian. So I'm probably a lot hipper than a lot of 30-year-olds. So just going through the year, there were 12 albums that I thought were. Yeah, go ahead, Caleb. Yeah, you raised.
Oh no, I was raising my hand because you're hip. You're hipper than this 30-year-old.
Yeah, I know that. That's well established. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just going to go through 12 albums this year that I thought were exceptional, leading to what I thought was was the best album. Sleaford Mods, their UK Grim album. It's their 12th album. They just seem to be getting better and better and better. I thought that was great. Depeche Mode's Memento Mori, not their best effort, but again, this was the first album that was released after the death of Andy Fletcher, and there's a lot of emotional resonance to this record. And at the same token, like it's one of those things that stays with you.
Yeah.
So I thought that warranted
It's on my
a
list as
mention.
well.
The National First Two Pages of Frankenstein was a fantastic album. And I know Caleb is not any big fan of Oasis, but I thought Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds, the Council Skies album, was the best album since Morning Glory associated with anybody in Oasis. And for me, the solo career of Noel Gallagher with High Flying Birds has been frustrating because I actually think his brother beat him at the game with the BDI albums and the solo albums. I just thought were much more listenable. I thought he was firing on the cylinders he needed to fire on. Jason Isbell in the 400 unit, I would
Weather
rank
Vanes.
Weather Vanes up there. Another album that I think was a great return to form was Queens of the Stone Age in Times New Roman. Did not really cotton to anything from like Clockwork on, and I really enjoyed. It seems they were taking a few steps back, but properly gardening the fields that they know how to grow stuff. Great quasi Americana band out of Brooklyn called Geese. Their 3D country album, I would rank that. Another great return to form, The Ballad of Darren by Blur. This could have had a 1997 copyright date and you wouldn't have batted an eye, and I don't mean that and just for nostalgia. It was great. I have to give this next one to our friend Wendy a shout, because this isn't necessarily an artist I really dig into apart from the hits. Guts by Olivia Rodrigo.
Yeah.
Lot of re-listening to that. An electronic band I absolutely love that I've mentioned on the show before, Nation of Language, their Strange Discipline album. And Disciple. I'm very sorry about that. The National again with Laugh Track. This a secret album that came out of nowhere. And then Steve, if you can have a graphic, this is my favorite album of the year. This is a band named Wednesday with their album Rat Saw God. Caleb, and to some extent, Steve, since you're a transplant, and Bryan, you're Southern too. I'd be interested to hear your take on this because it's a very abrasive indie minded group, Wednesday, female fronted, and she's a writer that bears all, but it's still a very Southern act. They're from Asheville, North Carolina, and they're not afraid in between Gang of Four type of guitars to throw in a pedal steel in there here and there. I'd be interested to hear what if you listen to this album, not just the emotional resonance, because I do think it's a very powerful album, especially addresses some issues of distinction of addiction and loneliness, but the varied reference points that coalesce in this album I thought was really interesting. This is my favorite album of the year.
I will listen to it tomorrow. Yeah, I'm curious. You've got me kind of peaked.
Yeah, and on the EOC thread, there seem to be a lot of people agreeing with me that this was the best album of the year. So, and then for my favorite single of the year, there's something about movie songs. And Steve, if you can pull that graphic up, and this is not an artist I ever gravitated towards before, but Billie Eilish, What I Was Made For. I think it's an exquisite vocal. I think it's a powerful lyric. And I listened to this again and again. You know what? My favorite single last year was a film song as well, was Diana Ross and Tame Impala with Bring on the Sunshine. There's something about movie songs right now that they just have an advantage for being my single of the year. So there you go.
Well, Bill, I'm gonna take your offer, and I want to throw in some honorable mentions and stuff that are albums that came out this year that I loved, and that like they didn't hit my top songs, but I've listened to these and actually bought most of them. Sir Chloe's "I Am the Dog." Since you just mentioned Billie Eilish, Sir Chloe, if you don't know her or the band, it's like if Sonic Youth and Billie Eilish had a baby. It really is it's pretty good shit. I'm a big fan. Black Pumas put out an album this year called Diamonds, Chronicles of a Diamond. Black Pumas is kind of a psychedelic soul band. If you haven't ever heard of them, they're pretty amazing. Alt Country again, the new Tyler Childers album is fantastic. Made a lot of noise because of the music video that will break your heart. Very queer, super good. A metal album that I adored was the new album by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, which is called Petro-Dragonic Apocalypse, and it is freaking amazing. I love that band. Very, very good. Janelle Monáe's new album was good. Killer Mike's new album was good. And those are probably my favorites. Other than, like I said, Weather Vanes, Depeche Mode was on my list. There were some bands that really did disappoint me. But I do want to throw, again, Sam Smith's album, was it Gloria? It was really good. I quite enjoyed it too. So I cover the gauntlet and what I listened to, but those were all Mangskin's new album, which is kind of this metal stuff. It's called Rush. Really good. So lots of good music came out this year. Couldn't talk about them all. Iggy Pop had a new album. So yeah, but if you haven't listened, if you kind of like weird alternative stuff, listen to Sir Chloe. I think people will really dig that. Probably one of my favorite albums of the year.
Well, we had a comment here, a couple comments here from Will Lindis joining us from Movie Bears.
Hey.
Where he mentions John Batiste's World Music Radio is a hell of an album. I haven't heard that. Have you guys listened to that?
No,
I know who John Batiste is. I haven't listened to this album.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, that's a good recommendation for us, Will. Also, Guts is the top album for him. The thumbs up there from Bill. And then he also mentioned, going back to the kind of the Spotify Wrapped. His fifth place was the Indigo Girls, and I do have to say, I kind of agree. Indigo Girls popped up a lot, mostly because I saw them again this year in concert, and I see them a lot with Jason, who's a super fan. Because of the new documentary that came out this year, that's also one of the reasons why we might be listening to them more, and of course, Closer to Fine, being speaking about movie songs. Closer to Fine ended up being in the movie and exposing a whole generation of younger listeners probably to Indigo Girls and how wonderful they are. But yeah.
And of course, got to shout out to Mom and Dad. Dolly Parton and Rob Halbum's album that they did together, Rockstar. It's their album.
Oh my god!
No one else cares.
Absolutely.
Nobody else fucking matters. It's Dolly and Rob's album. That's it. End of story. It's amazing. I love it.
I love that there was this moment in the zeitgeist where Cher's Christmas song was against Dolly's performance at that. What was it? What football game was it? I don't even know what football game it was. And like that, people were like, "Wait a minute."
Yeah,
it was the same day, and it was just like this bake
day.
off that did not need to happen, but honestly, it was the best thing that could have happened because Dolly killed it. I do want to mention the rap thing. My number 5, which I don't understand, is Leon Redbone, and I'm not saying I don't like Leon Redbone. I'm not saying I don't like him. I'm not saying I've never listened to him. But I have no idea why. It must have been one of those things where like Spotify just went down a weird rabbit hole and I wasn't paying attention, because I don't seek that out in my life. I don't. And it was just there inexplicably.
My father tortured my mother and with his debut album. Tortured us playing
that was
I'm kidding. It was like my mother hid the album. She literally hid the album. She couldn't take it anymore.
That was Kentucky Headhunters that my dad tried to put down to push down all of our throats. And yes, I understand totally. But yeah, Spotify raps are fun, and yeah, there's issues with Spotify, no doubt.
Yeah.
But also I do appreciate metrics. And also, so those of you who did it, did any of you get like a special message from somebody in your like top artists? There was like a video message from I
know Taylor Swift did one.
Nicholas Britell, I think I'm saying his name right. He did the score to Andor, which was another one of the things that I didn't list, but it's one of I listen to a lot. And that was my little special message. It was like
Boy Genius did this too.
Okay.
Boy Genius did a special message.
I haven't looked and seen if anybody did anything on mine.
Yeah,
you should. It's just it's an interesting touch, and I'm glad they're paying more for that, because Nicholas Britell is not a largely known musician outside of the world of soundtracks. So I mean, I appreciate that they actually did that with him. Hopefully they paid him. Yeah.
I was looking at one that came up that I know I've listened to over and over and over again. And that was Alison Ponthier's Faking My Own Death from an album from like several years ago. I don't know why it keeps coming up, but every time that it cycles through on a playlist or a shuffle, I listen to it. And I'll sometimes go back if I kind of like come to in the middle of the song. I'm like, no, I need to restart.
That's so funny.
Just sad indie songs, just somehow.
Oh, speaking of the rap though, and Bill, I'm sorry you don't get this. What was your categorization? I was a vampire. Did you guys
do that? I mean,
I did. I was the shapeshifter. Yeah, it's only a Spotify thing. I was the shapeshifter.
Weird. Someone's a vampire. Someone's a shapeshifter.
Yeah. So what that meant for me, so I listened to and again, it's weird how it does it. I listened to over 55,000 minutes of music this year. But I listened to 150 some odd genres of music, and they have weird genre classifications. But so what it said is, hey, you like to ping on one thing, you dive into it deep, you love it for a really short period of time, and then you just move on. It basically called me fucking flaky.
Oh my god.
So, yeah, I got called out as a flake by Spotify hard. And I am not okay.
That is harsh. So vampire meant I like moody, emotional music, which I mean, yeah, of course, but also I don't think that accurately reflects it. And then my boyfriend Brandon he's an alchemist, and alchemists were big because they make a lot of playlists. So they synthesize these experiences out of these songs. So anyway, this is a new thing this year. If you're on Spotify, you might as well find out what your archetype is, but also who the hell cares?
Well, I've enjoyed being the music bears for a few minutes, but I think it's time to turn back into the comic book bears. So, Steve, we'll start with, as we always do with you. Tell us about reading something that you're digging.
So I'll try not to be too long because, again, I'll lose my voice. But so I'm a huge Hellboy fan, but I didn't start as a Hellboy fan. When Hellboy came out, I was kind of like, meh, in the comics. Love the movies. But with the comics, I was kind of like, meh. Fell back in love with Hellboy and the Hellboy universe, the Magnolaverse, with BPRD. BPRD, Hell on Earth is, to me, probably one of the most epic and comprehensively beautiful, tragic comic stories I've ever read over the course of, 50, 60, 70 issues. Just a fantastic, consistent, perfectly written story. But obviously, since that's done and the world has ended in the Magnolaverse, what they've been doing the past several years is going back and, doing Hellboy in different eras and Hellboy with different people and different side characters. And one of the side characters that they have just come out with to give the origin of was Panya. Panya is a living mummy, basically a woman who is thousands of years old, who was preserved back in, maybe 3000 BC. And was revived by the Heliopic Brotherhood of Ra. She has powers of sight. She can see the future. She can interpret omens. She has weird pets, and became part of the BPRD sort of early on in their adventures. And in the story Panya and the Mummy's Curse, it brings you back to her childhood and her origin. Like, how did she become the living mummy? Mike Mignola, Chris Robertson were instrumental for this story. Chris Robertson did most of the writing on it. And Christopher Mitten did the art, the interiors, and most of the covers. Absolutely beautiful work. Very, very moving tale of this little girl who started out as essentially, a temple maiden in a pharaoh's court. The pharaoh had apparently at this point changed the religion that was allowed to be worshipped to a single worshiping point, just the sun god. Nobody but the sun god. You have to worship the sun god. And she's noticing that there are certain things that are happening to her as well as to other people in the visions that she's having. And she witnesses the absolute destruction of the temple, the death of the pharaoh, all of these things, but survives them. And in doing so, she kind of awakens something new within her. And, as it follows her over the course of this 4-issue miniseries, she's given more insight into the visions that she's having, sort of a light versus dark, an evil black dragon versus sort of a light and good fox creature, constantly battling. And the art interiors are really great. It's a way for Mitten to kind of play around with Egyptian motifs and Egyptian fashion, things like that. That just very interesting. And the covers, I think, are gorgeous. There's a lot of really beautiful, very simple, and very contemplative artwork that's going on here. But as you can see, a lot of what kind of drives the story is this vision, this sort of, something in the world is telling her that she's important, and that something that she needs to do is help usher in the world, like a new age into the world. And she's basically presented with, the history of Hyperborea and the future history of the destruction of the world and hopeful saving of humanity, from this. But it's really interesting. It's very intriguing. And it's a beautiful story. There's some action. It's not just her sitting around having visions all the time. She is fighting creatures that are in the desert. Some very fantastical things happen. And there are zombies that are good zombies. But it's really great. And then, of course, eventually she becomes a mummy. She's basically found dead, and they inter her. And she awakens in the late 1800s as sort of a sideshow mummy. And they realize she's actually alive. And she becomes sort of the resident psychic for the BPRD and how she appears here with her weird sort of like, I don't know, bird creature that follows her around along with many cats. But yeah, I love it. Have you ever read anything with BPRD that focuses on Panya? She's usually just sort of a side character, but it's very interesting and has some great interactions with Liz, characters that we all know, Liz, Hellboy, Abe Sapien. She's very sort of important in kind of driving the narrative in Hell on Earth. But
yeah, I don't think she showed up in Plague of Frogs or any of the stuff I've read. So
no, she wasn't around so much in the early Hellboy books. She became more important in BPRD in that series.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. But just a fun character, and the story just makes you really care about her. So
is that her first solo miniseries, or?
Yeah,
it is. Okay.
Yeah, she's always been a side character. She's always been sort of like there in the background, and again, instrumental for sort of driving some of the actions, but never as a focus.
Okay, thank you there, Steve. Well, let's throw over to Bryan. Bryan, tell us about something you're reading that you're digging.
So, I as I've said before, I don't read as many comics as I used to, but I got a Kickstarter fulfillment. This is a few months ago, but I've been sitting on it and kind of like, I need to read this. It is the new Brandon Graham book, and I know Brandon Graham is an artist and writer who creator who is, he's got a lot of stuff out there. He doesn't do really work with the big publishers as much anymore. I loved and was introduced to him through his work with Image, specifically the Prophet miniseries with Simon Roy, I believe. But his art style has always appealed to me. I like his sort of minimalist in certain ways design, but minimalist in like shapes and detail, but then he crams so much stuff into his layouts that sort of amplifies the story. So Moonray is a Kickstarter he did. It was based on a video game that I have not played. So I do not know all of the finer points of the game and what that involves, but it's actually his writing and art with assists from Xerxo G. Penalta, who I was not familiar with, but actually when you're going through it's a graphic novel, I think it's like 6 issues, but as you're going through it, like his Xerxo's work kind of punctuates a stylistic difference and kind of fills in sort of like an interstitial gap in the stories that Brandon has written. So my understanding is the way they approach this project is they really wanted him to root in the world of the game, but then take that as a starting point and then go off and tell stories and sort of expand the world in detail. So he does that magnificently. Again, if you like Prophet, if you like his work on Prophet, this is the closest, more so than Rain Like Hammers, more so than King City, obviously. Like this is where he really gets to kind of go back into that very abstract science fiction, post-humanity, post-everything almost. I was actually trying to remember what this reminded me of. Are you familiar with Italo Calvino's work? He has a book called Cosmic Comics. And Gaiman has sort of cited this in some of his stuff as well, in his Sandman work, I believe. Very abstract, kind of like before time or at the end of time. Nothing is recognizable. Nothing is what we expect or conceive of. So it's very fantastic, high fiction or high science fiction-y stuff. But yeah, there's a couple interior pages I wanted to just show. It's a story about these people, these souls that come back to life after probably centuries or millennia, and they're reanimated as part of this force or this substance called minium, and it's sort of like is made out of old gods that have died. So the sort of the premise is all life emanated from gods back in the day, and there's actually panels that sort of depict the main character sort of being like a samurai. But then
it's very source wall.
Yeah, source wall. No, actually, yeah, you're right. That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. But yeah, so that idea that they got reabsorbed and then they kind of become manifestations or avatars of that substance. And specifically in this case, he is or they, I don't know, the pronouns are kind of wishy-washy but they're male presenting to a point. They are like an avatar for Ilatar, and Ilatar is a goddess who has been abducted, a more recent incarnation sort of goddess. So really high concept stuff. This is a great example of a panel, if you're watching on the stream, that Brandon Graham's stylistic choice of just cramming all of these like interesting little factoids and sort of nuggets and sort of just like little not story beats, but outside like interstitial moments of explaining the world. He loves these. They're throughout all of his work. They're just a fun and rich, dense like source material, sort of like, you know, back in the day when you'd get to the end of an issue of a comic and you'd get that infographic, you know, you get that real deep dive into something, and those are always just so fun. And his other work, he makes a lot of jokes and sort of puns. This one has been pretty straightforward. He hasn't done too much with that playfulness, which I do kind of miss, but it's still really great to see what he plays with. So that's sort of that main character. And then the next character that is very much in tradition on the next page of his work. He loves the female form. And his artwork is probably some of the most sensual or sexually, I don't know, like there's something about his form, and it's very much female forward. Like he doesn't do this with the men as much. Occasionally a little bit, but like, let's be honest, he's kind of more on that traditional, like, no, I want to draw women. Yeah. And I think he does it in a way that it doesn't exaggerate it too much. It doesn't make it too like I don't have the right word here, but it's there, that sensuality or that sort of just honest. They're there. It's present. And you know, again, I could see and I actually would love to know, like, do readers that, you know, they see this as too sexualized? Like, I don't know. And I haven't. Yeah, I don't know, Caleb, have you heard of anything that's sort of like
So some do, right? But there's a specific type of, I think, comic reader that know who Brandon Graham is, and this is, I mean, it's Manara, right? Like people who read Manara, they know what they're getting with Manara, and the same with Brandon Graham. Now, I will say, like you note his work, like very sensual nature in this. Rain Like Hammer had a little bit of it too, but Brandon Graham has done. I like your word sensual, so I'll use it. He's done sensual comics, right? Like there are comics that Brandon Graham has done that's just straight up porn. That's like if you've never read any of his porn comics, and quite frankly, it's not something that I'd seek out. I mean, I've got this if I need porn comics, but his straight up porn comics are actually, you know, for what they are, they're really good. And so if you've never read any of that and you want to see where he really cuts loose and just takes off all the barriers and anything, there is no restraint whatsoever to his work, check out some of that stuff, because he just is like, nope, you're getting this. Like, you thought what I did in all my other work was that is restraint. This is no holds barred, and it's interesting.
Yeah, and I want to make sure I'm presenting it in a way that's sort of honest, but also, you know, again, it's open to interpretation. I think if you follow his work on Instagram, yeah, he definitely falls in that, like you said, category. But it's very honest and upfront. He cites a lot of references to sort of prior cartoonists that do this kind of work, and he loves that. His partner is also very active on Instagram. They actually do like a podcast and a YouTube video series together, and they talk about this sometimes and sort of the influences and all that. But in this specific work, this character is a sword, and this sword sort of becomes imbued with this minium, and the sword then becomes sort of sentient and sort of takes on characteristics of this soul. And so I think Brandon has described this work as sort of his interpretation and sort of thought process on a mediation on the end of everything. Like, what does it look like in the far, far, far future? What's a modern mythology that we can sort of draw on, or I can put forward as like sort of reflecting his own views of an afterlife of sorts. So it's not just an adaptation. It's not just a video game comic. He really did try to put a lot of his own things that he's been sort of working through about, you know, life and death and all that into his work. And again, it's the closest fix that I've gotten to that Prophet experience. And Prophet was a great work. I mean, based off of okay 90s kind of thing, like the work that they let that Liefeld, allowed the other creators to come in and do, was just, to me, such an elevation of the material that anything like that I do latch on to. So yeah, it's on Kickstarter, but if you go on to if you look up Moonray, you can actually buy this now. Of course, it's available now for different formats and print. So yeah, I hope you enjoy his art. Again, just if you really like this, check out his Prophet work, and also go to his more like straightforward, not auto bio, but like his more just kind of regular like slice of life stuff that's still not straightforward at all. But like King City is a great example, and Rain Like Hammers, I actually only read the first issue. I need to go.
I didn't like it.
I kind of heard that. Yeah.
It's weird. I mean,
but all of his stuff is a little weird. But I guess even his fans were kind of like, I don't know. It's but yeah.
I think it was his attempt at doing like Mobius a little bit.
It was, and he gave really big layouts, and I think he did a really good job showing like cut like what happens when you cut a spaceship, and you show the full architecture and stuff. That stuff was cool, but it just did not land for me. And I like Brandon Graham for the most part, so it just wasn't my cup of.
Okay. Well, it's almost as if you took the mic there, Caleb. So why don't you keep it? Tell us about something you're reading that you're digging.
Yeah, I will. And pardon if I interrupt it with any expletives. The Cowboys games is not going the way it should go, and I'm not happy. And it's close to it. There's things I'm verklempt. But the book that I read this week, it's 35-30 Seahawks, and like it's fourth quarter, man. So yeah, I'm in a place. I'm in a very specific place in my brain. No, Bryan, no, bad Bryan. Just because you live there now doesn't mean anything at all. You're not a fan. Take it back. Anyway, so I read a book from our friends over at Scout Comics that I did not expect to love as much as I did. I just grabbed it. I was like, let me see what this is. Like, cool cover. I'll check it out. Picked it up right off the stands. And the book is called Fung Gi. For those of you who are watching this as opposed to listening, Steve just benevolently threw up a graphic for me that shows the cover. This book is both written, drawn, and colored, and I think lettered by an individual named J.M. Ringway, I think is how you pronounce the name. So this actually, the art in this is really what drove it home for me and made me just fall in love with it. Very thin line, it's kind of detailed, not Mobius by any means, but does a little bit with texture, but it has a very nice economy of line, right? You can just see the texture built into it. I thought it was really cool. Kind of has a semi manga feel to it, but not just overtly exaggerated the way that some manga can be. So I saw this and like grabbed it, loved it. But what is this book, you're thinking, right? What besides the art grabbed me? This book is an interesting tale that takes place in a world called Miko. And in this world, it is populated by anthropomorphic fungus, like fungi. Like so these are mushrooms that live and walk around like people, and that's just who they are. There's also giant bugs, which I think is really cool. But there's different types. So just like there's different types of fungus among us, there's different types of mushrooms growing, right? Like so there are different races of fungi. And it's a world that is predicated on the idea of like feudal Japan. So very much samurai culture, which if you know me, Lone Wolf and Cub, I think is one of the best long form stories ever told in comics. So that kind of grabbed me, and I tapped into this. So the world as we know it is again very feudal. There are different tribes, different warlords, different clans that are at odds with one another. But it really takes off when the story. It opens in this kind of semi-urban scene, and like people are meandering about, and there's a woman in a cage and like a little cart, and she's trapped, and she's trying to convince people that, hey, look, if you can rescue me, you spring me from this, like I'm a big deal, I will pay you, there will be gold available for you. And her name is Earl Barris, right? And she is, she's a member of something called the Katha clan, and she is a big deal. Like, and she's been kidnapped and sold to these slavers that are not great people, as you would consider a slaver not to be. And so as these people are walking by, one of them is this kind of very tall, samurai-esque Ronin-looking guy, and she tells him the same thing. She gives the pitch like, "Hey, if you can get me out of here, it'll be worth your while." And this particular person's, this Fung Gi's name is Basen Nada. And he's not the kind of person who's like, he's not going to meddle. He's like, look, I don't know what your story is. I'm sorry you're in the position you are, but like, you're with the slavers. Your life as you knew it is over. I'm like, I can't do anything for you. I've got a mission. I'm going to go do this. And he and his little counterpart, which is this little small, cutesy little giant head looking fungi, named Dochin, who rides a giant beetle around. They just go back on the business, and Dochin's like, well, you could have rescued her. She's needing rescuing. That's not very nice. And he's like, look, we're on the path. We got to go. Oh, they make it about to, a little bit out of town, sunset or whatever. And he was just like, yeah, I'm not sleeping. I'm going back. And they go to spring her. Also, when they do, as they're on the way back, she's talking to another prisoner. And this gargantuan, this giant one-armed, just behemoth of a guy, just strong, but only has one arm. And his name is Kurya Sumu. And he's also a prisoner. And he's like, look, man, if my good arm was loose, I'd break you free. Can't help you. So this is very, very much a getting the gang together kind of story, right? Our would-be hero shows back up. Basen lays waste to the slavers. Like he's a bad man with a sword. And he springs everybody. But none of the other characters are just, they're not just folks that are without skill, right? They are there to kick ass and take names too, in which they do. So you have this really cool martial arts moment where the gang is all together, slavers are defeated, and then you get the story of how, hey, this is a feudal system, and my clan is being attacked by this other clan. There are machinations afoot, and we've been betrayed. Cut to the people who betrayed them, who are the very machination evil folks, who find out through a message via fly mail that their prisoner, who they were going to hold hostage and use as a pawn, has been loosed. And so they send fungus ninja assassins after them. And the fun just goes from there. And it really is a fun book. I cannot wait to get the second issue of this. I don't have it yet. I think it has been published. It is out, or at least it will be out very soon. It's wonderful. It is a very neat take. It's a very cool samurai story. The story in and of itself could be told using different figures, using different people, like using humanoids, right? But why not throw some fungus ninjas in there? Why not have a samurai with like with a cap, like the mushroom cap is his hat, right? Like it's just neat looking designs told through a very detailed, almost like a bande dessinée oriented type of visual style. So I really love this. Can't wait to read more of it. And it's been a long time since I grabbed a book off the stands. Like, didn't grab it in previews, didn't know anything about it, just was walking through the shop, saw this, was like, oh, I need to read this, picked it up, and kind of like low-key fell in love with it. And I want to see where it goes. So if you like old school samurai stories, if you like Lone Wolf and Cub, or if you just like really funky, quirky stuff, grab this. It'll treat you the right way. You're on mute.
Yeah, I was on mute. That's good to hear, Caleb. It sounds like a fun series, and the cover's beautiful.
Fuck yeah! Oh, shit, mute. Sorry.
It's okay, dude. I get it. I get it.
36-35 Cowboys.
Just think of me on Sunday night when we're playing the Chiefs. Okay, just
right there with you in spirit.
Stops. Yeah, right. Okay. The book I wanted to talk about, and I'm surprised there hasn't been a little more press about this, is Supergirl Special #1, which is written by Mariko Tamaki, and the art is by how did I just blank on the first name? Skylar Partridge. I'm surprised that there wasn't more press about this because Tamaki wrote the Supergirl Being Super miniseries, which was then reprinted in, I got seen this book here, the young adult format, and it's sold very well of a alternative universe. The books that are in the um, young adult series that DC has are not necessarily bound by continuity, but it was a very successful series, very well done series about what you know uh, Kara in the early 2020s would be like in an actual real universe. But this is the first time that Tamaki has done has it has um, tackled the DC Universe Kara, and where we are with this is these. If you've been following the Superman books, the Superman family is much more of a family right now. They've embraced Power Girl, who is the Earth 2 Supergirl, into the family. Steelworks are closer. Kane and Keen, um, both John Kent and Connor. They're functioning more as a team now than they have been in the past. But that brings a sort of rivalry between the two characters, between Supergirl and Power Girl. And Supergirl, as we're going through this series, we find out a little bit more about her time in Argo City before Krypton exploded and she came to Earth. And she's always had a bit of a complex about never amounting to what she should amount to. We flash back to her as an athlete in school on Krypton, and she just comes short even with her mission with Superman. She came to Earth to be to Kal-El's protectorate because of the time spatial differences. She arrived after him, and he was already a grown man. So she's been dealing with this. Um, the senses of not amounting to what she should amount to, and now on top of it, she has a rivalry all of a sudden that's mostly created by social media, as you see in this picture there, with Power Girl, who's essentially the same character. They're both Kara Zor-El. Um, but Power Girl is very different from Supergirl in demeanor and perspective and talents and a whole lot of things. So you'll see here that the artist is Skylar Patridge. And Steve, if you can just go through some of the other pages here, you'll see here that this is a race where Kara was winning and she came up short. I really like the almost Hernandez brothers take that Skylar Patridge uses. Skylar is an LGBT creator. The first work she did for DC was in one of the Pride anthologies, and she also has been working very closely with Vita Ayala on the backups about the Amazon, that wonderful Artemis one shot. But she also is somebody, if you look at some of the work she does for Image, kind of adapts to to the writer that she's attached to. So what you're seeing here isn't necessarily what you would see in Artemis or you would see in some of the work that she did for Image. Um, and we see here, that this is, again, another example of what I thought like almost an indie type of artistry applied to DC Universe characters, where um, both Supergirl and Kara going after, basically trying to save the day. And if you go to the next one there, Steve, I think there's another one, which is just a wonderful character moment because Lois Lane now is almost like the den mother. And yes, Lois Lane is revealed in this story that she makes a pretty good cupcake. Um, that she goes to talk to Kara about what's going on. There's a nice resolution between Supergirl and Power Girl that's somewhat comedic, but in terms of a character that's always been viewed as a second rate. I think Superman came before. There's always been this element that there's now this added element of Power Girl, and because of the newness of the character to most observers, she's the hot one right now. She's the one that's trending right now. And it was a very nice humanizing take on Supergirl. I am on the extreme minority that I wasn't crazy about the Tom King miniseries. I know I'm in the extreme minority on this, but the embrace that Tamaki had for this character, as you know, sometimes the Kryptonians are more human than the humans, and it's something nice to see. So that's is my recommendation. Supergirl Special #1.
I want to go back to what you were saying at the very first about the family dynamic, because it was interesting. Some other side conversations in some of our mutual groups that we're part of were having conversations about the Fantastic Four, because it's rumored that a very significant former Batman artist is now going to be drawing Fantastic Four for the first time, doing Marvel work for first time in a long time. And so that brought out this idea that people just don't write it like family, and who could do it. Mariko Tamaki is no stranger to Marvel, done a lot of stuff, but I've read a lot of her stuff where she really just nails the family dynamics, good, bad, and otherwise. I think that there's they could take notes from the stuff that Mariko too.
And especially if you dug her She-Hulk series, I think you'd like this.
Okay, I'll check it out.
It's a lot of that same kind of introspection at the same moment that action is happening. I think you would really dig this. Plus, it's just a one shot.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I'll grab it.
Big dedication
for sure.
All right. Well, we are looking at almost 2 o'clock. 2 hours that we've been on. I'm sorry, fellas. I had a long week. So I think we should start wrapping this show up. Before we get to our woofs of the week, if anybody has geek gets, I think it would be the time right now to show them off. Steve, I see a geek get behind you. A very nice Thor poster.
The Immortal Thor, #1.
Nice.
My geek get, Requiem.
Oh, nice.
By somebody that we might know, Mr. David Hazan. This was from a Kickstarter that he and Mr. Bogach put together. This did deliver this past week, and it also got a very beautiful print of the character. So I haven't had a chance to read it because it just came, but I can't wait.
Oh, Bryan, it's so nice to see you also have pajama pants on. I do too. I don't think I'll be able to show them, but it's like
the season.
Yeah. It's like
and slippers.
Mine are beagles. There's beagles and hearts. Beagles on a sled with hearts and stars. But yours looks much more like grunge.
Oh, it's very much the hunter flannel pattern, I can't even. There we go.
Okay. Well, I saw you reaching over for something, so I assume you got a geekette there.
Well, yeah, I wasn't sure where I was going to put this, but yeah, I actually got to go see our friend of the show, Cena Grace, here in Seattle when he was up here for a signing of his Superman Harvest of Youth. And he did sign my Superman Harvest of Youth, which I cannot find, but he also signed, yay, there it is.
What it looks like.
Self-Obsessed, his autobio first book, very, very obviously very important. And one of the later ones, oops, that's that one. Nothing Lasts Forever. Yeah. Another autobio book, what I think is his last of the sort of trilogy of them. Not excluding other little limited mini things he's done that we will not talk about. But yeah, Cena was great. Loved to see him. Actually went and saw him with the other friend of the show, Zan Christensen, who was there in Capitol Hill where they were doing the signing at Phoenix Comics. So yeah, I've had these for a while, but he did sign them. And again, if you're not familiar, Cena is a great queer cartoonist, and his new Superman is amazing. We're going to talk about it at some point on the show when we've all had a chance to digest it. But seriously, some of his best stuff is his autobio, so you should check out his books.
I can't wait to talk about this book. I can't wait to talk about this book at some point. I know somebody's still waiting on it. So we'll get to it soon, and hopefully with the artist and writer themselves. I really hope we can make that work. Over to Caleb, and Caleb, I understand you just might be distracted because of the game, but if you can,
commercial break, we're good.
Okay.
So I grabbed I'm slowly but surely getting all of the the Gargoyles action figure from Nika, and this is the armored Xanatos, famously from the first season. He built his own gargoyle armor. Very, very beautiful. I don't know if you can. Sorry about the glare. Just these action figures are amazing. I love them. They take up a lot of space. I don't know what I'm going to do with them all at some point. They're like almost taking up an entire shelf, like the entire bottom shelf of my little thing back there. At some point, I'm going to have to figure out a different way to display them. They're super cool. If you like the cartoon, if you like the comics, which are amazing right now, Dark Ages is just killing it. Check out these if you're a toy collector, or if you're not a toy collector and you just wanted to put up a little shrine to our favorite winged lizards. Fun stuff.
How often are those being released? Are they one at a time, or?
It depends. They come in waves. And so some other folks, our friend Rick from the EOC kind of community, he gets his hands on them before I even see them in the wild. They're hard to find, so I'm not actually sure.
Because I know with some of the Nika things that I've paid attention to, like the Flash Gordons, that they might release like 2 at a time.
Yeah, I don't know if they're 1 at a time, but it's like, and it's not staggered in a sensible way either. Sometimes they'll just be like, hey, it's Tuesday, let's throw one out. Like, I don't know how they plan it, but it's interesting.
Okay, for my Wolf of the Week, I had with Black Friday and me with home video, I expected to have a stack to show you, but those days are dying. So that was La Bamba. I did want to show off something that was from Black Friday. And if you're familiar with Record Store Day, they do have a Black Friday date apart from their date in May. So I did pick up Joni Mitchell, the Court and Spark demos, and again, I'm dealing with the glare now, actually from our screen. But this is a series of demos recorded in 1973 from her Court and Spark album. Especially the versions of Help Me and Raised on Robbery are absolutely beautiful, and it's really interesting to see the evolution of a song, from the germ where it started to its finished product. So that's my Wolf of the Week, Joni Mitchell Court and Spark demos, and this is one of many of the archives from Joni Mitchell that we're going to be seeing over the next few years. All right, we're going to wrap this show up. When we wrap an episode of the Comic Book Bears Up, we do so with a segment we call the Woofs of the Week. In the bear community, if you find a fellow attractive, you woof at him. And we do something similar here where we woof at something, which may be a comic book, but it may also be a film or a TV program or a charitable initiative. Anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener or viewer, may be interested in sampling. I'll start, as I always do, with Steve. Steve, what is your Woof of the Week?
Well, it's kind of cheating because I haven't seen it yet. But my Wolf of the Week goes out to G-1 or Godzilla -1, which is the newest Japanese Godzilla movie that goes back to basically, the late 1940s and sort of retells the story of Godzilla coming in and destroying Japan for the first time in the post-war Reconstruction era.
So it's not a sequel to Shin Godzilla?
No, Shin Godzilla was a one-off. It's a one-off. It might as well be Godzilla Gaiden.
Okay, because all the other Shins seem to have sequel. Okay.
Yeah, Shin Godzilla was probably something that they started, and we're thinking they were going to continue with, but it just.
I was under the impression it was a sequel to Shin Godzilla because how close in time they are. So all right.
No, this one goes all the way back. But I've been doing the 25 Days of Godzilla. I still need to put up a couple of mine before I finish, but I'll be seeing it this weekend. Maybe I can drag my husband to it. Probably not. He hates Godzilla movies. But I can't wait to see it. It's got such great buzz, such great reviews. I can't wait.
Yep. If I'm not a pussy about going to the movie theater, I'm thinking I may go see it too. And if people don't know, both Steve's been posting the Godzilla movies he's been watching. I've been watching a shit ton of kaiju stuff too. So we'll have to confab because Steve, I actually made an Excel sheet. I have to get over to you and Craig. So if you want to go over through that, and I'm so bad. I've gotten to the TV now. I got through Ultra Q. Now I'm on Ultraman, and then after that, it's going to be Giant Robo. So it's like crazy. All right, let's go over to Bryan. Bryan, what is your Wolf of the Week?
So I just finished, because it's very fast, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off on Netflix. And if you are a fan of Scott Pilgrim, and you whether it's the movie or the comic, honestly, either one, you will really enjoy, I hope, what they have done in this adaptation slash well, just call it an adaptation, because if you say any more, it could spoil things. But it is very much not what you think it's going to be. It takes some turns and some twists that are absolutely not what you would think would be a straightforward adaptation choice. But it's so much richer. It's so much better. It gives certain characters way more agency and a chance to really breathe as their own entities, and tell their own stories in a certain way, or certain their own perspectives, if you will. So love it, love it, love it. It's like 6 or 8-ish, 30-minute episodes, very fast. Music by Monoguchi and Joe Trapanese, who did a lot of work, has done a lot of film scoring over the years, including working with Daft Punk on Tron Legacy. And it's just great stuff. And Anna Monoguchi's a great chiptunes band out of Brooklyn. So check out Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. It sounds like, or looks like, I'm not the only one that enjoyed it here. And I'm glad, because some people might get precious about the original material and want to just see that. But honestly, this is such a much more interesting sort of a, not Rashomon even, but just such a different take. And it's neat.
Okay, so Caleb, I see there's 143 left, at least on my phone. Can you sneak in a Wolf of the Week, or are you?
Oh no, I can do it. Yeah, no.
Okay.
Depending on how this goes, my Wolf of the Week might be Mike McCarthy, but that's yet to be determined. So my Wolf of the Week actually changed as the show jumped on, right? Because I had a television show that I was going to talk about. I'm actually going to save that. It's very good, but I enjoyed it. But my Wolf of the Week actually goes to a trailer that dropped today. The Furiosa trailer came out today, and it looks amazing. I cannot tell you how excited. I don't remember the last time I got this excited about a trailer for it. Everything I loved about Mad Max is in this. It is amazing. George Miller's directing it. It's got everybody you want to have in it. Charlize is back. We got Chris Hemsworth in there, Anna Taylor-Joy. I mean, Tom Hardy. Nathan Jones is coming back as Rictus Erectus, which has the best name ever. I am so excited about this. I cannot wait to see this. If you have not seen the trailer yet, I highly encourage you to seek it out. Tackle that motherfucker. Anyway, yes, go watch this trailer. It is amazing. It's my Wolf of the Week. It gets multiple wolves. Also, I saw a live woofing in the wild the other day. Somebody whooped at another dude in the gym, and I was like, hey, that's cool. Do that more. It's great.
Cool.
So
do that more.
Nice.
Okay, for my Wolf of the Week, and Steve, I have graphics that I gave you. If you can put them up, at least the first one. My Wolf of the Week goes to Archie, the Man Who Became Cary Grant, which aired recently in the UK on ITV. I believe it's going to be on BritBox in the States in a few days. And this stars Jason Isaacs, and there are points where you forget Jason Isaacs is Jason Isaacs, and you think he's Cary Grant. It's a wonderful portrayal. It tells the story of Cary Grant, who was born Archie Leach, therefore the title. If you guys know me, you know this is my favorite actor by far. Go around this corner, you'll see an entire you'll see an entire hallway with lobby cards. I should have had something with you to show, because I've tons. And it basically concentrates on on one period of his life, which was during his marriage to the much younger Diane Cannon. The miniseries is There You Go There, and that's the actress there is Laura Aikman as Diane Cannon, and they're holding who would be Jennifer Grant, which is Carrie's only child. And the book is based in part on Diane Cannon's book, Dear Carrie. There's no way I can't watch Caleb looking at him there. I get it. I have some issues with the narratives. There is nothing too important, but as somebody that knows this man's life and career inside out, there were some liberties that were taken. They actually do address the gay rumors in a very tongue-in-cheek way, and I think that if Cary Grant were alive, that's how he would treat it. and in no way was that distracting to the main story of somebody who basically came from nothing and created a persona. I mean, the best quote ever from Cary Grant himself was, "Everybody wants to be Cary Grant. I want to be Cary Grant." So somebody who basically lived in artifice for their entire professional career and pretty much their personal life after after their 20s, and just very good performances throughout. But there's parts with Jason Isaacs, especially when he's on stage as part of an Evening Cary Grant, which was a live show that he did right up until the time he died. There really are moments you forget you're not watching, that you're not watching an actor, and you're watching that individual themselves. So you can see it and look at Caleb, and he's there in victory with his shit team. But I'm sorry, brother. I'm still enough of a Giants fan to hate you.
That's okay.
And all of Seattle's yelling at you right now.
Yeah,
that's okay. You got to look up to hate me, so that's fine.
Yeah, well, you're gonna blow it in the playoffs like you always do.
I don't know.
Like we always did too. It's not like we're even getting there, but there's signs of life. I gotta say, from my boys, there's signs of life right now. So, all right. You've just watched the Comic Book Bears podcast, and you may have just listened to the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can listen to us regularly through Apple Podcasts. You can listen to us through many other podcatching platforms. If you want to write to us, please do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. If you want to watch us, you can always do that post show on our YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe. We would greatly appreciate that. So until next time, I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Brian Pittard.
I'm Steve Morey.
And I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
If you're listening to an audio episode, you're going to hear a woof and an explosion. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Take care.
Go Cowboys.
Woof.